Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and coming up we've got updates on stories developing around the world. First up, the headlines. The Taliban claims ISIS-K's shadow governor for Nangarhar province is now in custody. ISIS-K have claimed responsibility for multiple recent suicide attacks in the country. India and Israel hold high-level diplomatic talks. India's foreign minister says the two nations have in principle agreed on mutual recognition of vaccine certification. They'll start free trade agreement talks next month. Communal unrest continues in Bangladesh. Houses of members of the Hindu community have been set on fire in Rangpur. The government investigates whether there's been a foreign hand in the violence. Myanmar's junta chief announces the release of more than 5,000 people jailed for protesting against a February coup which ousted the civilian government. Power shortages, supply bottlenecks and sporadic COVID-19 outbreaks hit China's economy hard. Third quarter GDP grows at its slowest pace in a year at 4.9%. Thousands of people in El Salvador take to the streets to air a range of complaints against President Nayib Bukele, from adopting Bitcoin as legal tender to firing Supreme Court judges. We'll begin in Afghanistan, where the Taliban claims the isis-khorasan shadow governor for Nangarhar has been captured alive. This just days after the Islamic State group claimed responsibility for Friday's attack in Kandahar at a Shiite mosque. That was the fourth mass casualty attack since the Taliban took Kabul. The latest shows a pattern of targeting Shiite mosques on Fridays. The Taliban have battled ISIS since its emergence in Afghanistan in 2014. The ISIS affiliate, ISIS-K, has claimed responsibility for most of the recent attacks in the country. WION's Anas Malik has been speaking to the Taliban's Interior Ministry spokesperson and asked him if Sirajuddin Haqqani has given any directive to act on ISIS-K.
Afghanistan and the world has not heard from the Minister of Interior, Mr. Sirajuddin Haqqani, on the issue of IS-K and other terror-linked groups. What do you think? Do you not think it is a problem because it's not coming public? What are his instructions would you like to disclose with regards to these groups, these terror-linked groups such as IS-K and others?
موږ ځینې امنیتي مشکلات لرو. زموږ مشران چې دي های لیول مشران چې دي هغوی ته تر اوسه پورې د اسلامي امارت د علماو د رهبرۍ او د مشایخو له لورې اجازه نه ده شوې چې هغه عام څرګند شي راووځي. کله چې د اسلامي امارت د مشایخو علماء کرامو له لورې دوی ته اجازه وشي چې عام میډیا ته راڅرګند شي هغه وخت بیا دوی راڅرګند شي.
This comes as the Moscow format meeting on Afghanistan is scheduled to take place on October the 20th in the Russian capital. This is the first edition of the dialogue since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. The talks will be attended by India, China and Pakistan. Meanwhile, former Afghan President Hamid Karzai says the Taliban needs internal legitimacy in order for it to gain international recognition. And he says that can only be achieved through the expression of the will of the Afghan people, either in the form of elections or holding a lawyer jirga assembly.
Legitimacy within our own country for this government or for any other government is the foundation of recognition by countries and the international community. And how to bring about legitimacy within the country is, of course, premised on either an election or, in case of Afghanistan, especially under the current circumstances, the expression of the will of the Afghan people through the Royal Jirga and the introduction of a constitution and so on.
To the UK now, and British lawmakers will pay tributes in Parliament to their fallen colleague David Amess. Lawmakers will hold a minute's silence after Patricia Hillis, the chaplain of the House of Commons, delivers specially crafted prayers in the chamber. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will then lead several hours of tributes before Speaker Lindsay Hoyle heads a procession of lawmakers to a remembrance service at a church in the grounds of Westminster Abbey. The veteran Conservative MP, who was 69, was stabbed to death on Friday as he met voters at a church in Leigh-on-Sea, southeast of London. A 25-year-old suspect, Named Ali Harbi Ali, a British national of Somali descent, is being questioned. Counter-terror police are probing whether the attack was motivated by Islamist extremism. Officers have also been searching a number of properties in and around London.
British police have arrested a suspect in the murder of lawmaker David Amess, according to local media and a source close to the investigation. Ali Harbi Ali, the son of a former media advisor to a Somali prime minister, was arrested under anti-terrorism laws following the killing of Amess. A lawmaker in British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party, Amess was stabbed repeatedly while meeting constituency voters on Friday in a town east of London. Police said they arrested a 25-year-old British man at the scene on suspicion of murder and believe he acted alone. A British source close to the investigation later named Ali as the detained suspect. Ali's father told the Sunday Times that his son had been arrested in connection with the murder, and in an email to Reuters called the situation unprecedented and horrific. He added, quote, "Due to the ongoing early investigation, I am obliged and commanded not to talk about it." British police searched an address linked to Ali in North London on Sunday. In a statement released via London police, Amess's family said they were absolutely broken, but asked people to, quote, "set aside hatred and work towards togetherness. Whatever one's race, religious, or political beliefs, be tolerant and try to understand." The killing comes 5 years after the murder of Joe Cox, a lawmaker from the opposition Labour Party, and has prompted a review of politicians' security.
Staying in Britain, and the country's chicken farmers are facing a post-Brexit labour shortage. Also, the pandemic combined with that have created a perfect storm. There's been a major cut in output and a substantial increase in wages. Labour market, energy price and supply chain issues across various sectors are building pressure on businesses in the world's fifth largest economy.
The world's supply chain problems are continuing to lead to shortages, backlogs or empty store shelves in several countries. At this poultry plant in East Yorkshire, Nigel Upson is seeing cash hemorrhaging out of the business from a perfect storm that has distressed every part of the farm-to-fork supply chain. Like food manufacturers across Britain, Upson was hit by an exodus of European workers after Brexit, along with COVID restrictions. Both factors added to the already soaring costs of feed and fuel.
We're being hit from all sides, and the Food Standards Agency are doing their best to beat us up as well, which is uncomfortable. But yeah, it is to use the phrase, a perfect storm, and as a consequence, the industry will be losing money currently, and something will have to give at some point.
The deepening problems in East Yorkshire reflect the pressures building on businesses across the world's fifth largest economy. In Britain's food sector, operators have increased wages by as much as 30% just to retain the staff. While all major economies have been hit by supply chain problems and a labour shortage after the pandemic, new immigration rules in Britain have made it harder for its economy to recover. A driver shortage has already led to lack of fuel at gas stations and gaps on supermarket shelves. For the rural businesses situated near the flat open fields of Yorkshire, Upson says the situation is dire.
Very damaging to the rural economy, potentially. This business puts £3-4 million a year into the very local economy, and if we can't get the labour, we will either ultimately end up closing, or we'll have to move our factory into a city.
Business owners have urged the British government to ease visa rules. But far from changing course, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says businesses need to cut their addiction to cheap foreign labour. He is urging Britons to invest in new technology and offer well-paid jobs to the 1.5 million unemployed people in the country. While 5,500 foreign poultry workers will be allowed to work in Britain before Christmas, the industry says it needs more. The UK will also offer emergency visas to 800 foreign butchers to avoid a mass pig cull sparked by a shortage in abattoirs. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a British-Iranian relief worker, has lost her court appeal against a second prison sentence in Iran. In April this year, an Iranian court sentenced Zaghari-Ratcliffe to a new term in jail on charges of propaganda against Iran's ruling system. That was just a month after she finished a prior 5-year sentence. That sentence, however, has not started yet.
British-Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe lost her appeal against a new prison sentence in Iran on Saturday after being jailed for 5 years on security offences. That's according to quotes by her lawyer that were reported in an Iranian news website. In April, an Iranian court sentenced Zaghari-Ratcliffe to the new term on charges of propaganda against Iran's ruling system. That comes just a month after finishing her prior 5-year sentence. Her lawyer told an Iranian website that a hearing was not held. Iran's judiciary did not immediately comment on Saturday's decision. In 2016, Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a project manager with the Thomson Reuters Foundation, was arrested at an airport in the capital, Tehran. She was later convicted of plotting to overthrow the clerical establishment. Her family and the foundation have repeatedly denied the charges. The detentions of dozens of dual nationals and foreigners have complicated ties between Iran and several European countries, including Germany, France, and Britain. All are parties to Tehran's 2015 nuclear deal with 6 world powers. Saturday's decision came as indirect talks between Iran and the US to revive that deal have stalled after the election of hardline cleric Ebrahim Raisi as president.
A close aide of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been extradited from Cape Verde to the United States. He's been charged with money laundering. The Venezuelan president calls the extradition a kidnapping.
One of the most vulgar injustices that has been committed in the last decades against the diplomat, special envoy and businessman Alex Saab Moran, kidnapped by US imperialism.
Saab Moran, secuestrado por el imperialismo norteamericano.
Venezuela is mobilizing at the United Nations, in New York, in Geneva, in human rights organizations. We are mobilizing at all levels.
The US accuses Alex Saab Moran, a Venezuelan envoy and a Colombian businessman, of using his accounts in American banks to launder around $350 million. The US Justice Department charged Saab in 2019 in connection with a bribery scheme to take advantage of Venezuela's state-controlled exchange rate. He faces up to 20 years in prison. The US also imposed sanctions on him for allegedly orchestrating a corruption network. Saab's lawyers say the charges are politically motivated. The Venezuelan government has reacted by suspending negotiations with the US-backed opposition that were set to resume. The talks were meant to end the country's political and economic crisis. Saab was due to be a member of the government's negotiating team.
Desde el principio, hemos advertido que
From the beginning, we have warned that this is a complex process and that requires a high commitment from both sides to make progress. We urge the other side to resume the Mexican sessions to produce the necessary agreements.
Las sesiones en México para producir los acuerdos necesarios.
Calling Saab a frontman handling shady dealings for the populist socialist regime of Maduro, Venezuela's opposition has welcomed the US action. The Colombian president has also praised Saab's extradition. He calls it a triumph in the fight against drug trafficking, asset laundering and corruption. Thousands of people have hit the streets in El Salvador in protest against President Nayib Bukele. Protesters carried banners and signs criticising the ouster of Supreme Court judges, the potential for the president to seek a second consecutive term, and the adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender. Bukele's recent actions have stoked concern among opponents that he is steadily concentrating power. He's even changed the description on his Twitter profile to Emperor of El Salvador and has also described himself as the dictator of El Salvador.
Thousands marched in El Salvador on Sunday to air a range of grievances against President Nayib Bukele, from adopting Bitcoin as legal tender to firing Supreme Court judges, which has been viewed by his critics as a power grab. At least 4,000 people took to the streets in San Salvador, according to estimates by local media. Some carried banners and signs rejecting Bitcoin, which officially became legal tender in the Central American country in September. Others opposed the potential for Bukele to seek a second consecutive term. Near the capital's main square, protesters set fire to a doll bearing the likeness of the 40-year-old president. Last month, Bukele proclaimed himself dictator of El Salvador on his Twitter in an apparent joke amid concerns about his increasing concentration of power. In May, a Congress dominated for the first time by Bukele's New Ideas Party voted to fire the judges on the constitutional panel of the Supreme Court, among the most senior jurists in the country. Replacements seen as friendly to the president were then swiftly voted in, which generated harsh criticism from the United States as well as top international rights groups. Bukele, a seasoned and often provocative user of social media, dismissed Sunday's protests on Twitter, saying, quote, "The march is a failure, and they know it."
After 2 years of poor rainfall, the COVID-19 pandemic and desert locust outbreaks, over 2 million Kenyans face starvation. The country is racing to find alternatives and ways to combat climate change.
In the last 2 years, northern Kenya has endured a severe drought. Climate change here is in full throttle. The situation was only made worse due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the desert locust outbreak.
It's now almost 3 days. Me and my family have gone without putting anything like food in my mouth. And today I'm happy I've got some food from the Red Cross. I'm sure it will last me for at least 6 days. And after these 6 days, life will be back to hunger. Because today you get something to eat, tomorrow you sleep without, or we look for wild fruits to eat.
Villagers are solely reliant on the ration trucks. Many here go days without food or water. It is not just people who are at imminent risk of starvation, but also the livestock. For many, it's their life's work that is at risk of being wiped out. Most of Kenya's open water sources are running dry. Others are working at 20 to 40% capacity. Not nearly enough to satiate the 2.1 million people that face starvation, while 400,000 children are malnourished, and over 93,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women who fail to get adequate nutrition.
To be able to reach here, you've seen we've had to drive long distances. It's extremely hot, it's extremely dry. There is no water, there is no food, there's no pasture for their animals. So this makes it difficult for them as a community. We are talking, of course, of providing immediate support to cover their immediate needs, but we are conscious that Even as per the forecast, the rains will not be good. The October, November, December rains will not be good, and therefore the food insecurity situation is likely to worsen.
Agriculturists are now looking for alternatives to be able to survive. Kenyans would have to switch to suitable crops and seeds. Crops that can thrive in arid regions and endure heat waves that are projected to increase in intensity.
Because of the changing climate, we have to look for seeds which are climate smart and climate approved. Not seeds of your grandfather, not seeds of your grandmother, nor not seeds of your father. Look for seeds which have been modified by the agriculturalists to fit the present condition due to climate change. And those are the seeds which will help you have some food on the table.
With the worsening situation, the food prices have surged. In some areas, 16% above the average price. And with the October-December rainy season forecast to be below normal, the situation is only going to get worse.
95% of the greenhouse gases have been contributed by the developed countries, and now China, India and Brazil are coming in, okay? Now, these contributions have the impact of giving us drought. And the reality of drought is there. They have the impact of giving flooding, and the impact of flooding is there. We lose people, we lose lives, we lose infrastructure, whichever way it comes. So we are the sufferer because the developed countries have ability to reconstruct their infrastructure much faster than we have. We don't have the resources to manage and reconstruct our infrastructure.
Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Somaliland broke away from Somalia in 1991, but few countries recognise its statehood. The territory of 4.5 million people is fiercely proud of its independence, but 3 decades later, the lack of official status hampers its economic hopes.
Around 1,000 students are graduating at the University of Hargeisa in Somaliland's capital. Young people represent 3/4 of the population in this unrecognised state on the Horn of Africa. They are fiercely proud of their independence of Somalia, but their future is unclear. Jobs are scarce.
We have been through a lot. This country has been through a lot, and we hope that unemployment will get better with time.
Somaliland declared independence from Somalia during the 1991 civil war. It has since thrived. Warlords and jihadists sow terror in the greater region, but Somaliland is a relatively peaceful enclave. Yet the breakaway state has struggled to gain international recognition. Saeed Shirki founded Somaliland's only museum. For him, there's no question that the claims to statehood are legitimate.
We survived without recognition, actually, because we know we exist. We have our own currency. We have got our own small passport, acceptable to neighboring countries. We have our multi-party system. We have all that kind of things. All the characteristics of a nation, we have them.
But it's hard going with scant recognition. The self-declared state cannot access loans which are necessary for the economy and for security. Half the government's budget is spent on keeping the people safe.
It's no one's interest that we collapse, first of all. It is no interest for Somaliland. It is for the international community that the democratic process that we have done collapses and we go zero-sum game. It is not the interest for Somaliland. It is nor for international community that the chaos come here.
A company in Dubai manages the port of Berbera, a key economic point. 30 years on, the hope is it will drive job growth and maybe draw some other foreign investors.
That's all we have on today's WION Live broadcast from London. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION World is One.
This is right, Arab.